Rowan Ramsey, the member for Grey, joins us again. Rowan, it's been a big week in the signing of, a reaffirmation of the AUKUS deal and nuclear submarines, but it's got people chattering about what might happen with the spent fuel from that process.
Yeah, well, it's a fair way off, Ricky. But yeah, you're right. The deal itself, I think, is generally good. I have some questions, particularly like a lot of other South Australians, about when manufacture will ramp up in South Australia and what's going to happen, whether we're going to have the extension of life works going on with the Collins class. And I think that's very important to avoid a valley of death, an even bigger one than we've seen in the past, all those things. But by and large, it's a good outcome. It's bloody expensive, let me say. And I'm unsure of Richard Marles's figure about a 0.2% increase in defence spending as a portion of GDP. That may cover the first 6 or 8 years, but I suspect later on it will require more than that. But anyway, all those things, I guess, are in the wash. And then it's come up about the waste out of the reactors. Now, by my reckoning, these are 33-year reactors in the Tridents, and it's anticipated it'll be the same in the AUKUS submarines. Now, even if we get Tridents in the mid-30s, then we're still looking 30 years before you need to worry about storage. So it's a long way down the track. But as far as the suggestions that it might go at the Kimba low-level repository, that's just not possible, and it won't happen. It's not in the legislation. It's not designed for that. I was just checking my notes from when I went to Finland some years ago, the construction of the world's first high-level waste permanent repository at Olkiluoto. Interestingly enough, it's on the edge, or in fact under the Baltic Sea, but it's 400 metres deep in solid dry granite. Now, we would have to find, I presume, things might change, but have to find a similar kind of geological formation somewhere in Australia to be suitable. And I think that that's not going to be in Kimba, and there's no suggestion it should be.
Yeah, and that's what I find odd about this. We spoke with Uncle Harry Dare from the Barnggala people while they were protesting outside the court action about being heard regarding the survey about whether the site should be at Kimba. He made this claim that the nuclear waste was already leaking at Wyalla. We went off and fact-checked all of that. The responsible agencies just effectively said it's just not true. I mean, we get this sort of information. Well, it's not even information. It's just claims that bounce around about a facility that are nowhere near what's actually proposed.
I'm incredibly surprised at those comments about waste leaking. But what we do know is that there are over 100 sites in Australia. I suspect it'll be more like 200, but we say over 100 sites where nuclear waste, radioactive waste is held, largely at hospitals, universities, that type of facility. That is not in a controlled environment, a regulated environment as such. And the proposal for Kimba is to bring all that together, put it in one place where it's properly managed. Now, if it's at the moment, a lot of it would be stored on North Terrace. Apparently it's not doing a lot of harm there, but we think it shouldn't be there. It ought to be in one specific place. And not only do we think that is world's best practice, it's what our Panzer has said the government must do. They won't keep licensing leukocytes. That'll be full for low-level waste from memory in 2028. I think for intermediate level waste by about 2030, 2035. So there is considerable, take some time to build this facility. We need to move on with it.
Yeah, and that's what we've heard from the regulator, Panzer, as well, is that they are around that 2028 timeline, and you don't build something overnight. As we know with the conversation we had recently on desalination down at Port Lincoln, you got to get on with it before the deadline arrives. But when it comes to this storage facility, is there any potential it could be scaled up to intermediate, for instance, or is it always going to be a low-level facility?
It's a low-level facility that is temporarily storing intermediate waste. Once again, with the intermediate waste, the time pressures are not great. We don't have all that much of it, and it's envisaged in the next few decades. We will find a place somewhere in Australia, elsewhere, that will be specially designed to handle intermediate level waste, because that has to be handled for a lot longer period of time. Now, it would make sense in that case to co-locate the intermediate and the high-level waste when the government's out there looking for a high-level waste site. Well, they can do that, and eventually I would imagine that's where the intermediate level waste are. But we haven't heard any of that from the government. And given, as I said, for the nuclear subs, we are, in my opinion, at least 40 years away from actually having to deal with that issue, maybe longer. I don't know that you'll see a lot of change in the near future, but it's certainly on the government's agenda that it'll have to get to it, and that'll probably bring the temporary storage of the intermediate level waste to a head, and so that will be dealt with in that period of time as well, I would have thought.
Yeah, to clear that up, you've mentioned the word temporary a couple of times. Is it conceivable the Kimba site will only be for a period of time, and then maybe there's a larger facility somewhere else in Australia where that might go and join intermediate waste in the future?
No, Kimba will be the permanent repository. Permanent mean as it sounds, the permanent repository for low-level waste. And those sites, it's envisaged it will take waste for the next 100 years, and then the sites will be capped, and it'll be monitored for the next 200 years after that, I think 300 years in total. And by which time it'll be at background levels of radiation. So it's only designed for the low-level waste in a permanent nature, so that's what Kimba will be.
No worries, Rowan. Good to clear all of that up with you as we keep tracking and fact-checking some of the claims that bounce around in this debate. Thanks so much for joining us today.
There's one other thing, Rick.
Oh, yeah, go on.
I think I might just cover off on because it came up at an event I was at recently where Harry Dare made the point that he'd been in Adelaide all week fighting the Commonwealth. Jason Bilney, the chair of BDAC, has made the point that the Commonwealth Government is taking on Barnggala and spent $14 million in the process in the courts. I just made the point that it is the Barnggala that have launched action against the Commonwealth, not the other way around, and I think that's a very important point, which they are free to do so. I'm not saying they shouldn't launch these actions, but we're on our third one now, and we are in court because they have called the Commonwealth to court to defend their position. So I think that should be, I think that needs to be corrected. And so I just take this opportunity while I'm on the radio with you to put that straight.
Yeah, it's a bit like the old biblical battle of David and Goliath. It was Goliath picking the fight, not David. If they want to paint it like that, it does look like David's picked the fight in this case.
Well, that is the case. And I'm not saying that the legislation clearly allowed for judicial review, and they've taken that opportunity. We're on our third court case now, but it isn't the Commonwealth that launched the action, and one would expect the Commonwealth, having spent millions of dollars developing the proposal to this point, running polls, education, having people in position, doing site classification, all these kinds of things, that what we would all expect the Commonwealth to defend our investment thus far, and that is exactly what they're doing, defending the investment, defending the proposal, defending the legislation that's passed both houses of Parliament with bipartisan support. It is the Barnggala that choose to take the Commonwealth to court.
All right, thanks for clearing that up as well, Rowan, and thanks again for joining us.
No problems, Ricky. Good to be with you. Thank you.